Hello and welcome to the AIM webinar series. My name is Mike Allen and I serve AIM Inc. as their member engagement manager. AIM is the trusted worldwide industry association for the automatic identification industry. For nearly half a century, AIM has provided unbiased information, educational resources, and standards to providers and users of these technologies. AIM membership provides access to an insider's perspective on trends and opportunities, along with a voice in shaping the growth and future of the industry. AIM member benefits include education, advocacy, and community, as well as a role in creating industry standards through collaboration. AIM is an investment in your future. Before the presentation starts, I would like to discuss with you a few housekeeping items. First, you will notice that you are muted throughout the presentation. Please do not use the raise hand option during this webinar presentation. If you have any questions during the webinar, please click the chat icon on the top right of your screen. After this, you'll see a chat dialog box at the bottom right of your screen. Make sure in the Send To box you select AIM Inc. and then in the box below type your question. We will try to answer as many questions as we can after the presentation. Today's presenter is BlueStar EMEA's Managing Director, Keith Robinson. Keith, take it away.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the invite. So good afternoon to everybody, or good morning in some regions, I do believe still. This is part of a presentation I gave at the AIM conference in Europe a few months back, and I've been asked to go through this again. As Mike said, please feel free to post up any questions and I'll try and answer them after the end of the presentation. So, one of the things I wanted to start off with is that, as we all know, AIM have been recently readdressing and changing their marketing and their logos, etc. And this is all really linked with some of the presentation I'm going to give you around the convergence of technologies, consolidation of partners and industries. As an IT distributor and involved very much in these areas, it's one of the things we're seeing more and more is convergence, not just of technologies, but of organizations, both resellers, ISVs, hardware partners, and other organizations in that vein. So this is all linking together, and we see how AIM can play a great part in this in terms of the forward development of the areas. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today around these particular areas. So looking at cybersecurity, how that's affecting the smart cities and how that also affects the adoption of IoT and IoT security, digitization, the need for analytics around all of the new technologies that we're seeing, how mobility fits into that, cloud migration, and really where the fourth industrial revolution comes from. And I'll talk more to that later on. These are all new opportunities for all of us in terms of sales, all the way through to supply chain, retail, new distribution centers, and specifically this is around the growth of, as people call it, the millennials, as they start to become more and more part of our society, and their new needs and requirements around how you interface with them and how they actually look and view the world as we move forward. So IoT and smart cities. Since 2015, smart cities have accounted for 13.6% of global IoT services and projects. And this is expected to reach 15% by 2021. So this, in terms of the IoT, is where a vast majority of that development is happening. And looking at how we make the 21st century homes and cities much more smart enabled. So this is developing new technologies and also, more importantly as well, combining those technologies that have been used separately in the past into single solution sets to provide the data and the information flow that's required for the technologies around these smart cities. So, one of the fastest things we see in this area at the moment is the IoT ISV. They're combining these technologies and providing single solutions. A good example of this is a two-sided touchscreen kiosk that's been placed in businesses and colleges, or even street corners. This has been designed so it cannot be shattered or hammered or blown down, etc., as you can expect in that environment. But the kiosk contains cameras, speakers, microphones, wireless LAN, networking scanner, RFID readers, and even charging stations. Some of these may have seen them in some of the cities that you're in, but also includes things like accelerometers, beacons, credit card readers, and even gas detectors. These kiosks can be used for a range of things, everything from just finding your location and where you need to go, a local wireless LAN for somebody that wishes to communicate over a wireless LAN network, for example, and the usual things such as payment of bills, interaction with government employees, and even see and look at severe weather warnings, for example. But it goes further than this, because these are intelligent satellites. So they have the capability of traffic control, even citizen security or visitor information when you're looking in, for instance, shopping malls, etc. So again, as you can see, this whole concept around this data integration and solution integration of moving into a multi-path is where this technology is moving us to. So what are some of the advantages of the smart city? As I say, the ISV channel, software developers, is just alive with new developments, new ideas, and new things all the time. So it is a constantly changing environment. And some of these partners are ones that are expanding their solution sets from maybe being involved in city grid technology previously, providing solutions around, for instance, monitoring bus information, bus supply, routing, etc., and combining those technologies with this new overall arena. Where we are seeing a lot of the new development is around, again, what we call the millennials that are driving the solutions and apps to really drive their own thirst for this type of technology. I'm over 50, so I look at my sons and they spend their entire day looking at their phone. If you ask them how to get somewhere, the first thing they do is pick up their phone, for example. Their whole ethos is around that interface rather than the communicative one. And again, this is also driving the use of this technology around us and out in the wider world. And this could be everything from efficiencies as they move back to the cities, people stop owning cars as they move into the cities, and their entire existence, if you like, works around the smartphone and the smart city. This also gathers efficiencies around in terms of how we actually work within the city, in terms of transit, utilities, how utilities actually handle recycling, refuse, for example, using RFID technology, for example, in terms of posting when and where garbage bins are in place, and technologies like that. So as you can see, it really covers a whole vantage point across all of the areas of what we would call a smart city. Everything from, as I say, utilities, control, public safety in terms of video surveillance, remote security monitoring, even letting people know that there are traffic issues up ahead. Maybe the local underground service is no longer operational, redirecting them to other places. So this whole technology arena coming into it. But what this means is that there's not only a requirement from a software point of view in terms of those technologies to supply that information and the ability to gather and analyze that data, but also the need to have beacons and monitoring equipment to enable this technology as a provision provider to understand what is going on around it and giving it the understanding of a real world concept. So this is where we get into what do we call the Internet of Things, IoT. We in 2017 expect to see significant news stories in this. For example, retail stores with wireless-enabled scales in the shelves to detect when an item are removed and transmits to the room for replacement. So in days gone by, you used to have somebody that come out and looked at the shop floor to see where shelves were empty. Nowadays, they're moving to technology which enables that to be automated and the provision of the new items coming out straight away. Another simple example of this is stethoscopes, which have Bluetooth functionality. These listen to your heartbeat, but also connect to the doctor's computer and stores that for later reference. This allows for more accurate comparison of patient's condition over time. But it's just one example of where our traditional technology is moving more and more into the mainstream and where things are going in the future. IoT is discussed, but many times very little is known. The basic premise of this is the connection to devices so they can communicate and share information. This creates increased personal analytics and a very, very ease of use. This does generate two views though. Depending on which side of the fence you're on, the information can be mundane, not of interest, or extremely frightening or extremely enlightening. And this is where this technology and where particularly looking at the super city of the future, where a lot of discussion is on at the moment in terms of where is that data privacy, where does that breach a person's individual rights, etc. So, if we look at, again, the millennials, they openly provide their information. You look at Facebook, you can pretty much see when they're going to go and get themselves a pot of milk or whether they've just bought something new, when they're on holiday, etc. So again, this is also looking at how the future goes in terms of our society itself and acceptance of that information flow and information being available about people as they go through. So the people that are becoming very, very effective in this area, they supply what I would call some key traits. They are obviously forward-looking and customer-centric, looking at how these technologies benefit the person, the individual, or the customer in the case of a retail side. Rather than looking at how it benefits them, how does it benefit the retailer or the actual user of the equipment? So the biggest opportunity here is turning data into information. The data that is most relevant is when human expertise is added to the solution, and the final layer is the information, not just the data. To put it bluntly, it's not about big data, it's about the right data. If you look at some of the stats that have been provided in terms of the amount of data and information that's now being stored using these various technologies, it's how you actually manage that data and make use of that data in a positive and a functional way. We have an opportunity to increase the Internet IoT, and combine the two folds and really form the fourth industrial revolution. There will be more connected things than people. Things can go where people cannot. Things have a lot more to say than people. Things can also say it more frequently. They can also be programmed, unlike humans. In the retail world, one of the most successful formulas is location, location, location. In the IoT retail world, the formula of success is security, security, security. Before I go on to that, I just wanted to show you an example of a typical millennial that has come up with his own idea. This is an invention by a gentleman, mobile digital signage. I believe this person's looking for VC injection, or if there's any angel investors, I'm sure he would be very interested. But it is interesting, as you can see, how technology is now becoming every part of everyday use. I mentioned before, security, security, security. This is one of the key areas about interfacing and using these technologies. Cyber criminals, as we all know, find the weakest links in the security and hook onto devices and then click onto more. So we have a typical hacker. He logs into your standard intelligent light bulb that's fitted into your house. From that, he gains access to the wireless network, onto the router and hub, and then into the individual's PC. From that, he can obtain security information, private information about the individual, and he can then also start to use that for his own illicit gains. This is one of the areas where this whole intelligent city and IoT needs to be cognizant of and really look at how we actually handle that security. If you look at typical installations, particularly as I mentioned, the intelligent light bulb, in the UK, for example, the large gas company, British Gas, they use a system called Hive, which has this technology. it doesn't actually have any security around it. So it leaves the door open to hackers and other cyber criminals getting in to attack these. So there needs to be protocols and designs, very similar to some of the areas that we've been involved in some of our other technologies in the past, to ensure that these technologies are easy to communicate with, but also secure and provide us with the details that are needed. The forecast, to give you some idea, are for billions of connected devices in the next few years. So this will become more and more of a requirement as we move forward. At the moment, there is very little movement in terms of security and security standards around IoT. And this is one of the areas that we would really ask AIM to take a forefront and look at that and look at how those security requirements and standards can be led forward to help bring all of the industries that are involved in this into a solution set that can actually provide us the needs and requirements of our customers, of the individual, but also protect them from any potential risk in the future. This is a graph from data collected from the Economist Intelligence Unit. It's actually sponsored by Oracle, but a number of executives were questions on this to look at how proactive they were looking at. So how proactive are the C-level people within medium-sized to enterprise organizations in terms of cyber risk? If you look at this, there are a large area of, if you like, respondees that are not looking at this area. And this again is something which needs to be looked at. We've seen, subsequent to when I presented this recently, or a few months ago, we've all seen the hacks that have gone on recently with the likes of TNT FedEx, their systems and being completely shut down for a number of weeks after a cyber attack, I think sort of 4 or 5 weeks, forcing their staff to go back to using pen and paper, unable to use their computer systems at all, and a number of other services. The National Health Service in the UK was under cyber attack 2 or 3 months ago, and again had to shut down a number of its emergency departments and other areas while that was fixed. So again, it's an important area, and it's an area where again, there is a lot of information to be gleaned, but also for us as a community to help drive, as I say, these standards and how we're working to enable us to provide our technology solutions into that. When it comes to data breaches, it is said that there are two types of companies: those who have been hacked and those who don't know they have been hacked. A Gartner report actually states that there will be 21 billion IoT devices used globally by 2020. Gartner, as you can imagine, also stressed that it is imperative that organizations update their network policies and ensure the ability to identify, secure and isolate all IoT devices for the reasons I have discussed before. It is also important that they understand that these are also directly managed within a facilities management side and gives access not only to their cyber networks but also to the facilities around them. There are even insurance policies offering 100K if your company's breached in the payment process world. The funds can be used to defend yourself in data breach lawsuits. 60% of cybercrime pointed at SMBs, hackers and criminals see SMBs in particular, so small, medium businesses, as being the ones particularly open to that. So it's not always the large enterprises, but it's the SMB businesses which are left open to this because they don't have so many security processes in place. We all know that the wireless marketplace continues to grow and continues to become a standard interface technology. So the market is growing around about 6.7% in 2016 and same period over 2015. This is mainly because of the deployment of 802.11ac, but they also go on to look at how robust that wireless infrastructure will be compete effectively in a digital economy. As we move more and more to the use of smart telephones, to, credit card transactions over payment terminals, for example, the requirement for that wireless LAN technology becomes higher and higher. And not only is it becoming more of a bandwidth problem, but also the quality of service needs to be there. If you are providing services and systems and solutions over those networks, there needs to be a level of quality of service. So this also leads back into the smart city in terms of having that network there, that coverage there, and the ability to connect as an individual to those individual networks and solutions. A little point on that is that the 802.11ac standard is the most rapidly adopted standard in the history of wireless LAN. And it just goes to show that even after 15, 18 years of wireless LAN, that technology is still moving and moving forward rapidly. 31% have IoT solutions. Another 43% plan to deploy IoT solutions in less than a year. So if you look at this as well, this is just not about wireless and where we're going. It's about how organizations are looking to deploy in the future and how they're looking to operate. I mentioned before, this is really part of the fourth industrial revolution and really the AI or artificial intelligence. We go back to 1784 with the first industrial revolution with steam and water mechanical equipment. Then 1870 when we had the division of labour with electricity and mass production. 69 electronics, IT, automated production. The possibilities of billions of people being connected with mobile devices has never been seen before. The opportunity, the ability and the capability we are only scratching the surface of now. With this unprecedented processing power, storage capacity and access to a knowledge level are unlimited. These will be multiplied by the emergence of technology in such fields as artificial intelligence, robotics and IoT. We have all seen the autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotechnology and biotechnology developments that are going on, not by the year but by the month. The fact that you can actually now do all of these things and the way that we move forward is at an incredibly rapid pace. We don't know where all of that technology is moving, but what we do know is that technology will drive this fourth generation. As a note on that, Bosch and GE both claim to have coined the phrase Industry 4.0. It was actually the German Federal Minister of Education and Research in 2011 that coined that phrase, and a very apt phrase it is in terms of Industry 4.0. Using all of these technologies, using where we are heading with not just smart cities, but smart industries as well. This will generate a mindset change and a complete change in terms of the way that we develop, we supply, and we actually purchase. It is anticipated that this manufacturing sector, which currently dominates the services market, will continue in that area. But as governments across various countries focus efforts towards industrial IoT to boost their industrial automation, could improve efficiency, manufacturing, and further growing efforts to penetrate pertaining to cost cutting, we believe that this will carry on being the driver around the use of Industry 4.0 or the IoT and communication technologies. We see also that the communications and technology advantages of M2M. If you look at, for example, electronic crane motors, where for the M2M world within smart cities, they can provide information in terms of maintenance, pre-checking and other type things inside this. So for example, monitoring a pressure valve in a water main so that it actually acknowledges and tells you that device is starting to foul, so that it can be replaced before it ruptures, and all of the associated issues around that, including emergency services and the other things that go on. This is a whole new area in terms of how we actually live our lives and actually communicate. So as I say, Industry 4.0, smart cities, for the first time these two things start to link together and the whole thing starts to become as one. I started off by this presentation by talking about the fact that this is all around data. If you look at all of the different technologies I've mentioned, whether it be beacons providing information on customers within stores, or whether it be a solution that provides tracking information in terms of buses going around the city centre, all the way through to the water main at the end, this is all providing data. That data, as I mentioned before, needs to be turned into information, and that is where the real power comes from, is how you take that data gained and turn it into useful information that can be provided and used. So welcome to the future. AI, we've all heard about it, it's all been talked about for a long, long time. We all start to see now robots which we can talk to and ask to do things, and starting to do more and more things. AI is becoming more and more intelligent. But again, as we look at smart cities with the ability to communicate and infrastructure, as I mentioned before, these systems now are no longer standalone. They are working connected in a connected world, having more access to information, data and technology so that they can provide a better service to us. Excuse me. The next thing, if we look at this in terms of artificial intelligence, if you look at things like Siri, Cortina, Alexa, they are more about predicting rather than reacting to a request. So if you look at those technologies, what they're trying to do is predict the questions you're going to ask and actually work out what the answer would be. Where we are moving to is, for example, IBM's Watson. This is a system that's built to understand the data and then uncover insights, to actually use true artificial intelligence to understand that information and diagnose and look at propositions. Again, this all links together with the smart cities in terms of how that technology is gained. The other thing in regard to all of these technologies is they are becoming more and more affordable. As these technologies roll out, as we look at different areas, as chipsets become more, computing power becomes more and more on a smaller chipset and lower power, these technologies can now start to be seen to be adopted. So I wanted to really show you some of the, some figures around some of the opportunities. We've been looking at IoT and working within IoT for some time now. One of the things that we've been working with is cyber trends, and they've been doing research, asking corporations and organizations where they saw the opportunity. As you can see, from the results of this particular search, looking at where they actually saw IoT as an opportunity, 84% of the respondents either saw this as being a major or modest opportunity or somewhere to invest. 44% of those seeing this as a major opportunity for investment. So it is getting traction, it is getting the eyesight of not just people like us that are involved in the technology, involved in the areas and involved in moving forward in terms of this technology, but also the manufacturers and the other e-commerce companies that are looking to provide or use these technologies. One of the other questions that was asked was this is really looking at users of the technology and how their strategies in technology for digitization for their business. How important was it for them? Again, if you look at this, there is a major amount of responsiveness as it being major to their investments. Some emphasis is 38%, major initiative is 42%. Again, 80% of the respondents saw this as being either very important or at least an aspect of their business. This is where the future developments are going. This is where organizations are investing their future to gain efficiency, to gain control, and to gain understanding. One of the other questions that was asked of the supply chain organizations, again, where Did they see this as being important to them? So again, if you look at it, a majority of these were looking at this as a major initiative. Supply chain is becoming more and more critical as we look at the changes in technology. If we look at the changes in the way that people purchase, more and more people purchase now by looking at online shopping. They don't go to shops anymore to buy. It's handled online. I'm sure you've all seen Amazon with their tests of drones delivering things over cities and dropping off packages and parcels. So the last mile advocates of the supply chain need to become more and more accurate, more and more aggressive in terms of their ability to supply. And this is particularly in the area of cities. So, most people are not at home all day. Being able to say you are supplying this product and going to a particular kiosk point where that item can be delivered, where that item can be used, starts to again enable that drive of e-commerce and particularly the way that the millennials work. But it also shows how we start to accumulate these technologies into a single set of solutions that provide multiple requirements. Just a couple of last little facts for you guys. ProBook, who are analytics, they report in retail business 8.3 million beacons or sensors were deployed in Q2 of 2016, just in retail. That's against 880,000 in the previous period. So that's that's an increase from 880,000 to 8.3 million in a year. This is the level of adoption of this technology and the level of which this market is currently growing. Descriptive analytics, as we talked about, is the information. 75% of IoT analytics, however, in the next 5 years will be what we call advanced analytics and will overtake descriptive. So what we're looking at here is that the actual information coming from and to these devices, be it postpods, will be analytical information, providing you information in terms of, as I mentioned before, is that pump wearing? Has that customer just gone into that shop? Rather than information on your current website where it's providing just generistic information, providing you with actual real-time information related to either what that individual or that particular module is actually doing. There's been a lot of talk around BOYD, bring your own device. This has been in a favour and out of favour for a number of years. From a security point of view, IT departments don't like it, other people do. But I think now what we're starting to look at is a change with BYOD no longer standing for bring your own device, but born with your own device. As we look at things moving forward, you look at people coming into the workplace and coming into the community, they have their preference, Android, Windows, iPhone. So no longer are people becoming adept in different technologies from joining an organization and working on that platform. They have their own platform preference. And this again will start to drive the differential in terms of how businesses communicate and facilitate within their own environments and with their own employees. But this is also very important as well around how do you interface with customers that have different technologies that want to operate in those different ways. It's very subtle, but it's very important because those people now, that is how they see how they start to operate. So this is really leading on to the subject I've touched on sometimes, the millennials. These are the people now that are starting to drive our society and drive the way we are. It's not really a technology group, it's a demographic. But in reality, this is a group of people that will now start to have a huge impact, not only on how SMBs and enterprise companies move as they go forward, but also how our society builds as we go forward. The adoption of these technologies, the adoption and the requirement of what they need when they're walking along a street or when they're going to a subway or when they're looking to pay their bill. Their whole concept is different to people of a previous age set. So what is driving this? Of course, it's about futures of businesses and how business can be better. but it's also driven by this demographic of millennials now that start to have more and more control and more say over how things work in the future. So I hope that that's given you some ideas of thought. I just wanted to say a couple of last things. So I mentioned on this, and I can't mention enough, if you look at the millennials and how they operate and how they actually look at technology, this is a key to where we drive in the future and how we start to develop new technologies to associate with that. It is the millennials now that are generating these small organizations that develop applications. You have a number of companies out there which generate Android applications. They sit in different countries. They've never even met, but they're a company to all the same. So the whole way of communicating is different. So I'd like to hand back to Mike for a couple of moments, just to see if there's any questions as I've gone through this presentation.
Thank you, Keith, for the great presentation, and we did receive a few questions for our AIM webinar Q&A session. You still have time to submit a question if you'd like. Just go to the chat icon at the top right of your screen, and at the bottom right of the screen you can type in your message. I'll receive it, and then, like I said, I can go through as many as possible. We do have a couple that kind of are in the same vein, so I will start with that one actually. On the Industry 4.0 slide, you list a bunch of enabling elements like big data, autonomous robots, IoT. However, these by themselves are tools to solve bigger problems. What problems do you think are the big business or societal opportunities?
So if you're looking at, there's two sides of this. One is from the individual point of view. So you talked about opportunity, but also problems. So there's, as I say, two sides. The first one is that we have the opportunity from an environmental point of view to be more environmentally efficient and better provision for ourselves. The issue we have, and up until now, has been the actual adoption and acceptance of technology, if you like, informing and having control. Classic example I would give of this is, as a personal one, my wife hates going on the DLR right way in the UK, in London, because somebody very cleverly told her that it's a driverless train, that it's a train which is driven by a computer. So she's always expecting it to crash. The point here is that it's about adoption of this technology. This is why millennials are so important, because these people are used to being, if you like, for want of a better word, controlled and enabled by technology. And that's really the thing that starts to make a change from a society point of view. I think, as you say, in industry, a good example of where, again, we start to make better use of this technology. Actually, at the AIM conference, there was a company there. They've developed a range of robots. One of the things these robots do is they actually sit in the back of a fashion store. At night, the staff go home. They allow the robot to go around, and it will actually do an inventory check. It will make sure that all the items are actually in the right racks and where the racks are, and it will report back. So again, I think there's some of the other changes as well about how we perceive the use of these technologies as they move forward. I hope that's kind of answered the question. If there's a little bit more, please feel free to ask a little bit more detail.
Okay, yeah. They just went on to ask, is it enhanced consumer experiences? Is it energy optimization in the smart city?
This is where it starts to come into one, because as you say, yes, some of it's around enhanced customer interaction. If there's more, if you look in a retail store, if the shelf's full, it's better customer interaction. We've seen some of the robots around that actually ask and take you around the store. I think they're a few years off yet. But it's a combination of all of these, and I think this is really where we start to see this starting to have effect now. It's no longer about, and even when you talk to retailers now, it's not all about, does this help me with my customer? Yes, it generates better customer interface, but it also generates me efficiency, and it's also green. If you can provide particularly a supply chain into a retailer, which means to say that they can hold less stock but more accurately, that's less things being driven along. That's less emission gases. That's less lorries going into cities where they're trying to stop the pollution, if that makes sense. So it's bringing those 3 or 4 things together, which is really driving this. And I think this is the first time we've seen this, that it's all of those different sides which are starting to drive the overall growth of this IoT and smart city technologies.
Okay, great. Thanks for the input there. And another question we received, when do you see the fourth industrial revolution fully being integrated?
Great question. It's a very hard one. I think the thing for us, in terms of the full integration, I think we need to resolve the security issues I mentioned before. We need to have standards and standards of adoption, because until that point we cannot truly have the open solutions and architectures that we talk about. It still has to be partly in a private network cloud, and I think for me that's the thing where we really need to drive forward, and that's where I reached out to AIM in terms of this, is both to governments, to organizations, etc., to produce relevant standards. It's a bit like if you look at the wireless networking or the wireless LAN. I'm old enough that I go back to pre-802.11. I was selling wireless LAN probably 20 years ago. The technology then didn't have a standard. You couldn't interface, you couldn't work easily, you couldn't plug the two systems together. So that technology was very limited. It's only since the 802.11 standard was released did it enable this convergence and the technology to roll out. So I apologize I can't give you a date, but I can definitely say that is the area that we need to focus on to enable full, as we call it, Industry 4.0.
Thank you for that. And another question we received is basically, is it possible for poorer countries, less technologically advanced countries, to stay on the same page with countries that are implementing these smart cities?
These are very good questions. So it is always the issue of future technology. However, I think it is always depending on the region. It is always going to be difficult for these regions to stay up to date. If we look at the technologies in some regions compared to, for instance, Western Europe or US, for example, those technologies will always be more advanced. I think the thing is, if you look at it though, is that some of these technologies are also around to assist people generically, and I think this will also open the door a little bit to those countries, whether it be via supported from more richer countries or whatever, to provide some of those solutions. You know, I saw on the news the other day about a big landslide in a particular country where buildings were coming down. Again, we're talking about beacons going into buildings and technologies within Europe and within the US. That technology is easily transferable into that, and yes, it does require. So I think there will be some transference of that technology, but more around probably initially about the humanitarian side and how we can use that to affect. Being very open with you guys, I think it is difficult, and it always will be difficult to see this technology flowing through at the same rate as in Western Europe. I hope that's answered your question, because it's obviously it's a very big open area question, which is probably another presentation rather than a 2-minute answer. So I apologise if it was a little bit too generalistic.
Yep, not a problem. Another question we received. You alluded to interoperability challenges for full implementation of Industry 4.0. Can you highlight what work standard bodies need to do to improve this, and what other challenges to interoperability do you see?
So the first one, I come back to my original point, is security is a must. We need to have a very defined interface standard wrapped around the security to enable those layers. You know, as I mentioned before, the simplest thing is an intelligent light bulb. It has no security. Anybody can lock into that, pick up an IP address, and backwork through your hub. So that for me is probably the most vital thing for us to, as an industry, to drive, and that enables the interoperability. I think the other thing as well is that if you look at it from a technology point of view, we need to have, if you like, a standard in terms of start looking at how we have a standard interface technology or a standard information transitory way. If you look in the payment industry where they're starting to look now at using blockchain type data analytics, which is extremely secure and provides a way to provide information as required by each of the individual acquirers or banks, etc., is how do we start placing that into this technology environment that allows the relevant people to gain access and gain that access in a consistent, defined manner.
Okay, great. Well, that wraps up our Q&A session. Thank you again, Keith, for your insight and knowledge and for providing us with this presentation today.
No problem. I hope you guys have found it useful. As I say, it was the idea with this was really to start people thinking and anything. By all means, please go through AIM and I'll answer any other questions I can do, or I'll reach out to other people that if I can't answer. And once again, thank you everybody for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to our audience for their active participation. I hope that you all found this information to be valuable. Thank you and have a great day.